I kept asking myself, why is this film called The Banshees of Inisherin, plural?
There are no banshees on Inisherin.
Well, there's at least one banshee in the movie. The old woman, Mrs. McCormick, is clearly supposed to be some sort of banshee, and the cast even refer to her as the Banshee.
I want to thank Sheila Flitton, who played our Banshee.
But Mrs. McCormick is only one individual, and the film's title promises banshees plural. And I don't think there's anything supernatural going on with Mrs. McCormick. There's nothing to suggest she is the cause of death. Rather, she's a human woman who is symbolic of death. But how did she end up the way she is? Why does Mrs. McCormick seem to revel in misery? What happened to her? In Irish folklore, banshees are said to warn of impending death by mournful keening that is heard at night when someone in the family is about to die. Keening is an old Irish tradition, and some people say that the myth of the banshees came about because of the professional keeners. Professional keeners were people hired to perform at funerals to facilitate the grieving process by elevating the melancholy. Over time, these real-life wailing grievers morphed into the myth of the banshees, and banshees later came to be depicted as female spirits or supernatural beings associated with death. I want to emphasise this next point. The banshee was sometimes thought to have once been a normal woman who enjoyed life, was incredibly beautiful, and radiated happiness, but some great sorrow overcame her at some point in her life, and she became a haggard old woman. I think it's this type of banshee that Martin McDonagh is referring to in his movie. A human being who is broken by grief, despair, loneliness and isolation. The Banshees of Inisherin was of course also the name of the fiddle tune that Colin was composing.
This I wrote.
What's it called?
The Banshees of Inisherin, I was thinking. I just like the double SH sounds.
Listen to Porrig here.
Plenty of double SH on Inisherin.
What does he mean by this? I think he's saying that there's plenty of shit on Inisherin. There's plenty to drag you down into despair, down into the lake. The Banshees are sort of like the demons in the minds of the characters. Everyone has Banshees within themselves, and they are metaphors for the human condition. Colm thinks that the Banshees are disillusioned with screaming.
I just don't think that they scream to portend death anymore. I think they just sit back, amused, and observe.
And Colm's demons manifest as disillusionment and despair.
How's the despair?
It's back a bit.
The Banshees in this film are grief, despair, disillusionment, and they're born of isolation from humanity, isolation from community and society. The Banshees are ego, pride, desire for status, desire for legacy, gossip, prejudice, and hypocrisy. If you keep watching, I'll explain why these emotions are isolating and what Martin McDonagh's Banshees really has to say to us. Inisherin explained. Banshees is an Irish Western, and it features a lot of the themes that you typically see in Western movies like conflict, civilization versus wilderness, and revenge. The pub was custom built to have a long bar with two ends so that the two main characters could stand off against each other. These two lone gunmen have a falling out. But why set this movie on an island? The island of Inisherin represents isolation, and the film is a study of the impact of isolation, whether it's geographical, social, or emotional. Think of that famous quote, "No man is an island." Every man is a part of the continent, a part of the main. So nobody is self-sufficient. Everybody relies on other people. But when people start to act as though they're self-sufficient, when people erect barriers between each other, there lies the road to ruin.
You can't just all of a sudden stop being friends with a fella.
Why can't I?
Why can't you? Because it isn't nice.
The film is about balancing individual interests against collective interests.
We were doing so well, Porrig.
I wasn't doing so well. I was doing terrible.
All right, I was doing so well.
So Colm, in a way, is practicing what we'd call today self-care. He's putting his own needs first over the needs of Porrig. As Siobhan also has to make the decision to put herself first and to leave the island behind and leave Porrig behind.
Can't be waiting around for any more of this madness.
But the island, aka isolation, corrupts its inhabitants. Isolation corrupts. Remember that the root of the word isolate comes from the word island. So to isolate is to put something on an island detached from everything else. And that's why Dominic ended up in the lake, because he'd become an emotional island. He'd lost his connection to Porrig when he found out that Porrig wasn't as nice as he had thought. And Dominic lost hope of a deeper connection to the mainland of humanity when Siobhan rejected him.
You probably wouldn't ever want to, I don't know, to fall in love with a boy like me, would you?
No, Dominic, I don't think so, love.
After that, he was completely cut off and there was nothing left for him to live for. Or at least that's the way he felt.
I best go over there and do whatever that thing over there I was going to do was.
Porrig's parents also ended up in the lake, even though it isn't too clear from watching the movie. But Kerry Condon, who played Siobhan, explained why Siobhan was down at the lake before she left the island.
You know, at the beginning of the lake, like before Dominic arrives, you know, there's a shot of her just looking out over the lake and then she waves the banshee. And so we had thought that the lake that she's at, that's the lake where their parents died, where Porrig and Siobhan's parents have drowned in that lake.
Remember, Inisherin represents isolation, and isolation leads to death and destruction. The score. I want to take a moment to talk about Carter Burwell's wonderful, mysterious, fairy tale-esque score with its childlike elementary school instruments like gongs and the celeste, which is like a fancy xylophone. The music suggests that something is lurking. It's unsettling. Porrig's theme switches between the major key and the minor key, so you never quite know where you stand with it. You never know if it's happy or if it's sad. Like Porrig, the music is untethered. Porrig is in a limbo, he's at a loss. Carter Burwell was under strict instruction from Martin McDonagh to avoid traditional Irish music for the score. Instead, McDonagh wanted something a little more mythical. And the opening music is actually a Bulgarian folk song, Polignala I Tudora. Martin McDonagh had been planning to use this Bulgarian folk song in a film for a long time, and to my ears, this song sounds otherworldly. McDonagh doesn't want to be parochial or twee. He wants the events that transpire in Inisherin to tell a broader story.
The other night, 2 hours you spent talking to me about the things you found in your little donkey shite that day. 2 hours, Porrig.
And while you can congratulate yourself if you figured out that the war between Colum and Porrig is a microcosm of the Irish Civil War, if you've stopped zooming out there, then you've missed the point of the movie, because Banshees is more than a story of a breakup between two friends, and it's more than an allegory of any war. It's more universal than all that. It's about the human condition. It's about our conflicting desires to be both individuals and at the same time to feel love, connection and a oneness with each other. No doubt at one point McDonagh checked out the translation of those Bulgarian lyrics. So, briefly, Tudora is sleeping under a tree, she's dreaming of her first love, and the wind blows and it breaks a branch from the tree and it wakes her up.
There goes that dream.
And what happens when we lose hold of our hopes and our dreams and our desires? You see, as humans, most of our hopes, dreams and desires are ultimately about connection with other people. You might desire money or status, or you might want to be more beautiful, but the reason that you have those dreams is because these are the things that help you get along in the human social environment. They lead to love, sex, companionship, connection, and oneness. There are two types of grief. Grief over losing something that we once had, and grief over losing a future that we dreamed we would have. So in the Bulgarian folk song, the result of Tudora's broken dream is that she's angry. She's angry at the wind.
So tomorrow, Sunday, God's day, around 2, I'm going to call up to your house and I'm going to set fire to it, and hopefully you'll still be inside.
And in Banshees we see that social disconnection leads to grief, anger, depression and violence. So the essence of the movie is actually found in those brief Bulgarian folk lyrics from the music at the start of the film.
You're an awful strange lady. No wonder no one likes you.
And that's why McDonagh included this little clip of the two little birds fighting. The little bird on the left is chasing off the little bird on the right. Animals and humans are individuals that are also part of a species, part of a community or a larger group. And we're forever fighting for territory, for resources, for status, to elevate ourselves on the social hierarchy. The social hierarchy is about survival. It's about sex and reproduction. Connection to others means love, life and survival, whereas disconnection means death. And Colm in particular is worried about death. Colm explained. So Colm basically ghosted Porrig, to use a modern phrase. There's a theory going around that Colm actually committed suicide early in the movie, and Porrig discovered his body. And there was that doll hanging from the ceiling. In this scenario, the rest of the film would be symbolic of Porrig coming to terms with losing his friend. It's an interesting idea, and Colm certainly had been having suicidal thoughts, but I don't think he literally committed suicide. Colm interacts with too many characters to be a ghost throughout this film. But in a metaphorical sense, his decision to cut himself off from his best friend was a form of suicide. He had become self-obsessed. The Banshees were wailing in his own mind, and he's grieving his own passing before it has happened. He's grieving the loss of the future man he thought he might one day become. Back in the pub, Colm is singing, "I'm a man you don't meet every day." It's a traditional Irish song, boastful. So here he is, a man you don't meet every day, attempting to create some lasting art that will somehow redeem himself and maybe even redeem humanity. Colm has got some pretty big ideas about his own status and importance. That's why he has this grief about his own impending death, because of his inflated sense of ego. Perversely, Colm wants to create a legacy, and that legacy would represent a connection to other people.
I suppose niceness doesn't last then, does it, Porrig? But will I tell you something that does last?
What? And don't say something stupid like music.
Music lasts.
Knew it!
And paintings last. And poetry lasts.
He's afraid to be forgotten. He wants to be remembered after 2 or 3 centuries because of his music. Being remembered through his music is actually a type of social connection. So he desires a social connection, but he's destroying a perfectly good social connection, his friendship with Porrig, in order to try and create a more enduring social connection through history. Human beings are complicated creatures. And there's another theory that Colm is actually being fatherly in a way. He's trying to teach Porrig an important lesson in life. Sort of like throwing him into the deep end so that he'll learn to swim. By cutting him off, he'll learn to stand independently. Colm might like to control or shepherd other people. He's a teacher, and he has puppeteering as a hobby, a sheepdog as a pet. So there might be something in that. He might be trying to teach Porrig a lesson. Colm does have some love for Porrig, and that's why he picked him up off the street and helped him home, and it's why he imagines playing his fiddle tune at Porrig's funeral.
Keep having thoughts about playing it for you at your funeral, but that wouldn't be fair on either of us, would it?
That might have been part of Colm's self-justification for his cruelty towards Porrig, that it's for his own good. I think it's mainly an existential dread that's causing Colm to act the way he does. Colm himself was unsure of his motives.
Do worry sometimes that I'm just entertaining myself while I stave off the inevitable.
To cheat death and become immortal through the creation of a lasting musical legacy is a pretty big ask of oneself. Or to create art that somehow justifies the existence of humanity with all its pain and suffering. Now, it's a tall order. So naturally, whether subconsciously or consciously, Colm's afraid of failing. And fear of failure is a common reason for self-sabotage. And what better way to sabotage your career as an artist than manipulating another person into making you cut off your own fingers?
What I've decided to do is this. I have a set of shears at home, and each time you bother me from this day on, I'll take those shears and I'll take one of my fingers off with them.
It's a relief to Colm after he's cut off his fingers.
It's a relief to me. So let's just call it quits.
And he doesn't need to carry the burden of being an artist anymore. When Colm fails as a fiddler, he can blame it on Porrig rather than face up to his own limitations. And he was already blaming Porrig for his lack of time for fiddle playing. Let's face it, Colm could easily have a quick pint with Porrig and still have plenty of time left for playing his fiddle. And he still had time to chat with the other dull islanders. So don't make the mistake of thinking that Colm's motivations should always be logical and coherent. He's a flawed human being like the rest of us. On the one hand, Colm does love Porrig, but on the other hand, here's the thing, Colm hates the reflection of himself that he sees in Porrig. He sees a simple man, a limited man, and Colm is deeply afraid that he himself is just a simple, limited man, and he doesn't want to look at that reflection. So Colm doesn't ghost Porrig because Porrig is dull. I don't believe that. He ghosts Porrig because he himself is dull, and seeing Porrig is a reminder of that, or he desires to be something special, and he doesn't want to feel that he's just like Porrig. But listen to Colm's fiddle tune. It degrades. It starts off more sophisticated, and then it becomes more angry and more messy. Colm's ego, his aspirations to greatness, his rejection of the value of a simple life and of just being nice, it's a form of cutting himself off from the community. And briefly, Colm believes he has found a way to cheat death. And when he first ghosts Porrig, he feels like a weight has been lifted from his shoulders because he's going to write this fiddle tune, and through its legacy, he won't be alone in the world. He'll be forever connected with his fellow humans through music. But isolation was never a road to connection. How could it be? And Colm slowly begins to realise it. At the end of the day, the fiddle tune's just a fiddle tune. And in the end, he cuts a lonely figure, humming his fiddle tune to the vast ocean, with nobody listening. Just a fat ginger man. Dominic explained. Despite supposedly being the most dim person on the island, Dominic often has the most acute observations. I believe that Dominic always speaks the truth in this script, so pay close attention to his words. At dinner, in Porrig and Siobhan's house, Dominic's dropping some truth bombs.
Just a fucking man, lads. A fat ginger man.
Dominic sees it. Colm has ideas above his station, and Colm's naive. And Dominic also sees that Porrig's niceness can be a negative.
Well, maybe this whole thing has just been about getting you to try a new tack. Start standing up for yourself a bit.
But there's a difference between standing up for yourself and being nasty. When Porrig reveals that he lied to Colm's student that his father had been hit by a bread van, that was a step too far for Dominic.
That sounds like the meanest thing I've ever heard.
The lack of togetherness, compassion, and empathy spreads like a sickness throughout the community. And Dominic is an innocent victim in all this, just as Jenny the donkey is, who represents Porrig's innocence. Dominic was already a victim of sexual abuse from his father, and he's a victim of the social hierarchy. To thrive, humans must balance being individuals and climbing the social hierarchy while still being part of a collective community. And that's how nature works. The collective, the species or the community thrives by individualizing, but it can be pretty brutal for the individual, especially if you're at the bottom of the social ladder. Porrig explained. Porrig is very afraid of the social hierarchy.
Do you think I'm dull?
He's afraid to be judged. He's not so much afraid to be dim, he's just afraid of being judged by his peers. He's afraid to lose his social standing. And that's partly why so much of Porrig's identity was invested in his friendship with Colm. Porrig felt that his friendship with Colm elevated him and lifted his status, and that's why he found it so hard to just let him go. Now, here's the thing to understand about Porrig. Porrig's niceness is something of a facade or a mask. It's a coping mechanism. Porrig's niceness is a form of isolation too. Because he doesn't want to confront negative emotions, he withdraws. He segregates himself from others by always playing the happy role,
A happy lad.
and not expressing his feelings. Or at least he did at the start of the film. And that's what makes him boring, or as Dominic says, a whiny little dull arse. Central to the film is Porrig's metamorphosis from a childlike, innocent, happy-go-lucky guy into a nasty, angry, and embittered individual, and that mirrors the harsh realities of life's challenges and disappointments.
I don't fucking care. Some things there's no moving on from. And I think that's a good thing.
Porrig becomes increasingly insensitive to Dominic's problems, and he doesn't listen when Dominic wants to talk about his father. And he's also insensitive to Siobhan's problems. Siobhan is reading her sad book, and Porrig explains his philosophy.
How's the book?
It's sad.
Sad. Well, you should read a not sad one, Siobhan, else you might get sad.
Do you never get lonely, Porrig?
Porrig pretends not to understand the question.
Ever get what?
Lonely.
Do I never get lonely? What's the matter with everybody?
And Porrig believes sad feelings are to be suppressed.
Maybe he's just depressed.
Well, if he is, he could at least keep it to himself, like, push it down like the rest of us.
There's a kind of dishonesty in a super nice person. If someone is always putting on a brave face, they're wearing a mask. They're emotionally distant and they're not revealing their true self. Porrig shutting down his feelings and refusing to talk to Siobhan is a way of isolating himself. When Porrig decides to fight back, he becomes more interesting to Colm.
I think I like him again now.
Because Colm's trying to fight back as well. He's trying to fight against his existential crisis to find the meaning of his life. But Porrig seemingly doesn't have this fight in him, at least when he's sober. Or he suppresses this fight because he's afraid of these feelings. And when Porrig decides to fight back, his vocabulary improves too.
And 9 fingers is the epitome of mental.
That's right, the epitome.
So, as an individual, some degree of fight, standing up for yourself, is desirable. Think of Dylan Thomas. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. So Colm wants to rage against the dying of the light through his music. He's fighting back against death. Porrig's character is elevated to some extent when he gets some fight back into him, but getting the balance right is a very fine line. Isolation or prioritising oneself can bring some temporary relief, but ultimately, too much rage, too much self-interest will have negative consequences. If you big yourself up, inflate your own ego, for a moment you can feel like you're winning the game, but ultimately, isolating yourself from your fellow humans, it can never lead to genuine and lasting fulfillment or true connection with others. The message of Banshees is that emotional support, validation, understanding, human connection and togetherness are how we can stave off the haunting loneliness that can consume us in the darkest moments of our lives. Which brings us to Siobhan. Siobhan explained. The name Siobhan supposedly comes from she, meaning fairy, and Von, which means woman or white,
What are you doing,
apparently. So Siobhan, she, Von, can also mean fairy woman or white fairy. So Siobhan is the white banshee. Siobhan doesn't respect Colm. She doesn't object of Dominic's calling Colm just a fecking man, lads, a fat ginger man. Siobhan is smarter than Colm, and that's established with the Mozart scene where Siobhan brings Colm down a peg.
It was the 18th century anyway. Mozart, not the 17th.
The problem with Inisherin, according to Siobhan, is too many silent men with petty grievances.
One more silent man on Inisherin, good-o.
She finds it boring, this stifled, suppressed emotion. The people are bitter and mental.
You're all feckin' boring, with your piddling grievances over nothing. You're all feckin' boring!
And it leads her to a dark place. And did you spot that Siobhan has her shoes off when she's at the lonely lake? The old woman is beckoning to her. And this is symbolising the threat to Siobhan's life. The island is threatening to take her. The isolation is threatening to take her. Dominic and Siobhan symbolically almost fall into the lake together. The same fate that beset Dominic almost befalls Siobhan. Ultimately, Siobhan rejects isolation. Ending explained, and why comedy? Some people really don't like this movie. It's incredibly bleak, and if you don't understand why it's so bleak, it could just come across as just an incredibly depressing movie. It's a real downer to see these people, these banshees, self-destruct. But like Mrs. McCormick, Martin McDonagh isn't trying to be nice, he's trying to be accurate.
I wasn't trying to be nice. I was trying to be accurate.
We live in a world where we're all going to die, and we're all struggling to find meaning and purpose in our lives. And once you start to think of your own self-identity as a completely separate, disconnected individual, then in a way you've taken a step closer to death. As a mere individual, you're like a leaf that's fallen from the tree, detached from all the tree's energy and nourishment. If your sense of self only includes you in a very narrow sense, and if you're getting older, and if your body's frail, and if you let petty grievances dominate your thoughts, then the banshees are wailing in your own mind, announcing your own separateness and portending your own death. But if your self-identity is a little bit broader, and you see your family and friends and your community as part of you, then there's always a part of you that will survive after your death. And humour is a way to reconnect with other people. It's a way for humans to be brave in the face of death and suffering. We laugh at the absurdity of the human condition to reconnect with each other and to be brave together. So be like Siobhan, rejoin the mainland of humanity, have a bit of fight in you, stand up for yourself, but don't isolate yourself too much through narrow self-interest and egotism. Your own demise, as it inevitably approaches, won't be so scary. And if you found this movie baffling, the battle between Colum and Porrig is inexplicable. You're meant to be bewildered. War is inexplicable. It's unjustifiable. Because the human condition is inexplicable. Existence is inexplicable. Existence just is. People complain about the ending to Banshees, but I think it's perfect. The two men have been overcome by sorrow, grief, grievances, and broken dreams. They've become banshees. There are no winners in isolation and conflict. Everyone loses, and it's an age-old, never-ending cycle. And the only thing that we can do to transcend our predicament is to nurture our relationships with other people and our connection to nature. And in that way, we can hope to quieten down and placate the wailing banshees in our own minds. And so I know, dear viewer, that as a human being too, you've got your own problems. You're facing the same types of problems that the characters in Banshees faced. So I've only got one last thing to say to you.
Good luck to you. Whatever it is you're fighting about.